So pretty much like Annetta said, the government decided that this year they were going, well, November of last year, that they were going to put an emergency preparedness requirement in for many different healthcare provider types. And at first, when I read through the rule, which is a 300-page document of regulation, I was 2 weeks post-op from a hip replacement. And I was sitting in my chair thinking, oh my gosh, how are we ever going to get this done? Because it was that in-depth and involved. So I had a little prayer time, and by the grace of God, we're all here today. So the first thing I want to talk about is just pretty much our introduction and our purpose. So as a home health hospice agency, we're well equipped to take care of people in a non-medical setting. Okay, so all of our staff are going, we have some of our nurses and our clergy here. We're going out into people's homes. So our clinicians are already coming up with interventions that may not be something you would see in a hospital. So if you think about that in an emergency situation, that's pretty helpful to be able to do, right? So you have, I mean, think about all the catastrophic things that have happened just this year, you know, with the catastrophic flooding in Texas, the hurricanes, the wildfires. So it's pretty important for community resilience to have folks in your community that can care for you, not at the hospital. So, I want to give you two examples of an emergency plan that worked really well and an emergency plan that didn't work so well. So if you want to turn to page 2. The first is the Boston Marathon bombing. Who's familiar with that? Everyone, right? We all remember that. We were all horrified by the things that we saw. So just some stats on that. 3 people died. There were 170 people that were injured. Okay, and all of them pretty much needed emergency level 1 trauma surgery. Okay,
which one of these are we following?
we're this one here. So we're on page number 2. Yeah, if you have any questions as we go, just shout out. So everyone that made it to the hospital lived. Okay, so that's 170 people that whoever got there lived. The bomb scene was cleared in 18 minutes. Okay, so all those 170 people within 18 minutes were in a hospital. Okay? And the victims were equally distributed between 8 hospitals in that vicinity. So if you're thinking about the bombers, they really weren't thinking real clear-like, because there were 8 level 1 trauma centers right in the middle of where the bomb happened. Okay, so that was kind of a blessing to have that many places to take people. The hero of this story, in my opinion, is the guy who was routing all these people. So think about the dispatcher. Okay, so what he did that day was made sure that everyone was equally distributed to those 8 hospitals. Not one hospital became overwhelmed. And all those folks were able to be cared for quickly. Obviously, everyone that got there didn't die. So to me, the hero of that story is him, number 1. But also, how do you think they knew what to do? They had a plan, and they practiced. So they did practice runs of, okay, what if we have mass casualty? How are we going to do this? So that fella knew what to do. He didn't have to go, oh, hang on, I got a book here somewhere. He knew what to do already. In contrast, we have Hurricane Katrina, which there was this hospital in New Orleans called Memorial. And I've referenced a book on that middle slide there. It's called 5 Days at Memorial. And if you ever have a chance or the inclination to read that, it's actually a very depressing book. But it actually clarifies the reasons why we're doing what we're doing. The reason why this rule came out is because of Hurricane Katrina. Okay? So at this hospital, they had a very poor emergency plan. Their bioterrorism plan was 101 pages. Their hurricane preparedness plan was 11. Let's plan better for bioterrorism than we would for a hurricane. They were JACO accredited, and basically that's one of the highest standards that you can be held to in healthcare. And if you read in the book, one of the executives actually said that was just to cover your hind-end plan. It had no functional ability whatsoever. Okay, so they had this plan that was dusty, sitting up on a shelf somewhere. They had 45 patients die, 23 of them were suspected to be euthanized. Okay, so what happened is, they got to a point where the doctors felt it was more humane to give these patients a lethal dose of morphine than it was to leave them in this hospital. So you can see the two contrasting events. So why do I tell you all that? I want Loving Care to be Boston. I don't want Loving Care to be New Orleans, because we all pretty much live in our community, right? So building a community resilience is very important. So the third slide down, the agency mission. So what was our mission going into this? Well, first thing, you have to identify your hazards. So if you think about Memorial Hospital in New Orleans, did they do a very good job of identifying the hazard that would most likely affect them? No. Okay, so we want to identify the hazards that are most likely to affect us. We're going to figure out how do we mitigate these so that if they do happen, they're not as impactful. And then we want to determine what are our capacities and capabilities. Okay, so if this did happen, what are we able to do? What do we have the capacity and capability to do to help not only our patients but our community? As a community, our goal is to prepare, protect, respond, and recover. Okay, so as part of this plan, that's what we're trying to do, is be in our community and to help respond and recover and plan. Moving on to page number 3. This top slide is pulled directly from the regulation, and they said this is what your goals must be when you're developing your plans. The first is that our people are going to be protected. So all of you, all of our staff. So in preparing for this, we need to make sure that everyone is protected. We're going to make sure that our business continues. So accounting, payroll, billing, all of those things continue to function. Our buildings will be protected, our equipment, our data, our computers. We're going to continue to care for our patients like we did prior to the emergency. And lastly, we want to preserve our agency, brand, and community image. And that's going back to, do you want to be Boston or do you want to be New Orleans? Okay. I think, how much better is the community going to look at us if they say, wow, Loving Care did a great job managing through that. They did a great job of caring for their patients, as opposed to, wow, 3 of their patients died, they had no idea what was going on. So when you think about it, we're also trying to preserve the logo that some of you have on that I'm not wearing today. So the next slide down, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this slide, but there were 5 people that kind of helped pull all of this together. I was mainly responsible to write the plan, which, like Annetta said, is 72 pages long. However, I needed a lot of help. So I needed Barb from a clinical standpoint to say, yes, in theory, that's how that should play out. And Tiffany to say, yes, from a community standpoint, that should be a good thing. So we each had our own role. The last slide on that page is being proactive as opposed to reactive. So our whole goal here in our trainings is to, I told my staff in the 3-hour training, the first time you look at this plan should not be when a tornado is bearing down on us, right? The first time you look at this plan should not be when the building is on fire. It should be now. They should already know what to do prior to it happening. I would encourage you all to do the same. When you go to Target, if this building catches fire, where am I going to go? If you immerse yourself for 10 months in emergency, that's all you think about. When you go to Olive Garden, when you're here, you're looking to say, how do I get out of here if this is on fire? Where would I go if there was a tornado? What if an active shooter comes in? What am I going to do? Okay, so I would encourage you all to start thinking in those ways in your own home. What if we had a shelter in place? What if our house catches on fire? So, etc. So, proactive planning. I will not bore you with the regulations. Just know that there was really no healthcare provider that was left out of this rule, which, if you think about it, makes sense. If their whole goal was to build community resilience, and they didn't include the skilled nursing facilities, is that helpful? Not really, right? So you leave one of the pieces of the cog out, and it's not going to work. We all have to have a plan. We all have to be able to work together to create this resilient community. I keep saying resilient community. The government says if something happens on a disaster level, you should expect to be on your own for 72 hours. Okay? So if you think about the catastrophic flooding in Houston, you have to be on your own for 72 hours. What do? Okay? When you think about that from a business standpoint or a community standpoint, as a community, we're going to be on our own for 72 hours. How do we help each other? Okay? So just another thought. 72 hours, what am I going to do? There were 4 parts to the regulation: planning, policies, procedure, communication, and training and testing. I'm not going to go into detail on any of those for you today. However, if any of you are interested in being an emergency volunteer, so during an emergency, I want to come and I want to help make phone calls, I want to help with the office, let me know. And we're going to do a bigger training with you that goes into more detail, okay? Or if you actually want a copy of the plan, I'd be happy to give that to you for your reading leisure. Okay. So lines of authority. Pretty much what we wanted to do was say that this person is in charge, which is our executive director. So in any emergency, she's in charge to be our emergency spokesperson. If something happens that she's unavailable, then we have it written in where myself and Barb equally succeed in management. Why is that important? What do you guys think?
You need a leader.
Right. And again,
In charge.
right,
You need somebody in charge.
right. But again, in that situation, do you want to say, oh, we have this whatever happening, who's in charge? Well, she's not here. Well, now who's in charge? What do we do? Then you have 17 different chiefs going, I got this. So it's very important to know that that's who's in charge, and if they're not there, this is who's in charge. Okay? And the board has actually signed an emergency document that says just that. Okay? So I don't have to call the board, I don't have to do anything, but we just succeed. Okay? So the all hazard assessment. Basically, it's not saying you have to plan for every possible scenario. Is that even possible?
No.
Think about just a tornado. How many different scenarios can you think of? Was it a direct hit? Did it happen over there? Did it happen over there? Did it happen
Here.
right? So there's so many different scenarios that it's impossible to write a plan to cover all of that. So what we're focusing on is our capabilities and capacities. So no matter what that scenario is, do we have enough staff to take care of our patients? If 50% of our staff is out of the picture for whatever reason, can we still care for our patients? Okay? So in all of that planning, that's what we're looking for. Now, do we have a general plan? Well, yeah, right? So if a tornado happens, number one, seek shelter, right? So there is a plan, but I'm not planning for every scenario. Okay? So when we did the hazard assessment, I'm flipping to page 6 now. The assessment that we did allowed us to see what our top hazards were. So our top 5 hazards, and I believe this is in the order that they appeared, was epidemic, pandemic, ice storm or winter weather, tornado, severe thunderstorm, and extreme heat. Does that sound like Ohio? Does that sound like Ohio in maybe one day?
Yeah.
Okay? I don't know about you, but it's like winter in the mornings, and then it's like extreme heat in the afternoon, and you don't know what you should wear, and whatever. So I'm going to go through some of these hazards, and not a lot of detail, but just some general information. And again, in your books, this has a lot of detail on a lot of the emergencies that we're going to talk about, okay? I don't have the time today to do that with you, but like I said, if you're really interested in this, let me know and we'll do a larger training. So the first is an epidemic, pandemic. And does anyone know the difference between the two? Yeah?
An epidemic is in a close quarters. A pandemic is like worldwide or statewide or...
Absolutely. So epidemic is this room right here gets botulism. I'm not eating, so you guys will get botulism. So that's an epidemic. A pandemic is not only does this group have it, but now there's a group in Africa, there's a group in Europe, there's a group in Canada. Now we have a pandemic, right? So if you think back to the Ebola, when that showed up here, that became a pandemic, right? Now, it probably wasn't labeled that because it didn't affect a large number of people at that point. So basically we're looking at the next slide down. It says potential results. And basically that's saying, if this happens, what's the potential result of that occurring? And you can read through those, but basically we're going to lose our ability to service patients. What if our staff are sick? What if our staff are home taking care of their sick families? What if our suppliers are sick? Okay, so you lose that whole resource chain. We have sicker patients than we would have. Okay, we bring someone in with a knee replacement who's getting better, and now all of a sudden they have, pick a disease, right? And then in catastrophic cases, people are going to die. We may lose key staff. We're going to have patients dying that shouldn't have died. So there's a lot of things that could potentially happen if that were to occur. What can we do to mitigate? The biggest thing you're going to see repeatedly is education. How do we educate people on proper hygiene? How do we educate our nurses on disease identification? So if a nurse goes out and she's seeing the same symptoms repeatedly, maybe that's a cause to alert someone that maybe there's something else going on. Okay? And then we're going to keep the appropriate personal protective equipment in stock. So gloves, masks, anything that we're going to need so that if this does happen, we already have the equipment on site to go out and see our patients. Okay, moving to the next page. Again, the potential results are pretty much the same, except for now we have really bad traveling conditions, right? So, and then we have something I call cascading events. If you think about dominoes falling. So we have an ice storm. Well, now we don't have electric. Well, now we don't have heat. Well, now we don't have water. So you think about just one thing leads to all these other things, like the hurricane. Well, the hurricane came through. Well, now we have flooding. Well, now we don't have electric. And now we don't have, and you can just continue to see. What are we going to do to mitigate? Again, we're educating. How do we drive properly in winter weather? Is your furnace serviced? Do you know, is your vehicle prepared for winter? So all of these things from an educational standpoint that we're going to teach our staff and our patients to make sure that they're prepared for winter weather. A tornado. So now we have pretty much the same things, except for now we're dealing with potential loss of structure. right? So our buildings may be gone, the patient's home may be destroyed, a patient's caregiver may be destroyed. Why is that going to affect the patient? If their caregiver's home is destroyed, does that all of a sudden put them at a different risk level? Because now they have a caregiver who can't care anymore. Okay, so that makes them more critical at that point. And again, it's all about education. What are we going to do if a tornado comes? What are we going to do if a tornado comes right now? Does anybody know?
Sit here and watch it.
Sit here and watch it. A good idea is go to the bathroom, right? That seems to be the center. There's no windows in there. So we're always thinking about where this isn't safe right here, right?
No.
So where are we going to go?
Crawl under the table.
Crawl under the table.
Can you do that?
We'll push Mary under the table.
How are you gonna get me out?
It may be irrelevant if you're if it is right on.
That's what you can do at that time.
Yeah.
On page number 10, and you can't see the slide very well, which I'm well, you might. You actually have color. I don't. The picture is of a man trying to get his grass finished mowing, and there's a tornado in the background. I think it's photoshopped, to be honest with you, but it kind of got my point across to some of our staff. If there's a tornado warning and you're in one of our buildings and we say seek shelter, do it now. Don't. I just have this one more thing to finish. A lot of you know Sherry, who's our billing coordinator. And I pulled this slide specifically for her because I could hear her say, I just need to bill this one last claim. I just need to click a button. It'll be fine. And she has to get up, go all the way downstairs into a basement. I'm like, you need a head start. So let's go. The point is, you know, a piece of paper is not worth your life. So if it's time to go, it's time to go. Okay? So if you're in one of our buildings, our main gathering area in the London building is the men's restroom, which all my staff were like, you gotta be kidding me, we're not chilling in there or any kind of tornado. There's also an office right there if you've ever been in the London building. You could go in there too. And the Marysville and the Annex both have basements, so that's a pretty easy. Actually in the Annex, there's actually this cement, it actually looks like a tornado shelter in the basement. It would have to be bad before I would crawl in that hole. Okay? I'm talking like bad. And I would probably let it start getting bad before I crawled in there. But I digress. Okay, so moving on to severe thunderstorms. Again, it's pretty much kind of the same theory behind a tornado, right? It's kind of the same conditions that you would see. We're going to start doing quarterly drills for tornadoes and severe weather. So if you happen to be in our building when we're doing one, congratulations, you get to see the men's restroom. Unless you're already a man and you may have already have seen it. I don't know. There's been times when the women's restrooms have been so backed up that we've actually used the men's because there's only 2 men and like 900 women. So. That was a joke. There's really not 900 women. Okay, so extreme heat. The key point for extreme heat is if we have patients who don't have air conditioning. Okay, so what can we do to help mitigate their risk? We're going to do call-ins. Okay, so I'm going to call these patients. Are you okay? Do you need help? What is your health situation? We may need to evacuate this person. Okay, so that's the kind of things that we're looking for, and that's something that we would call on volunteers to help with. We have a list of patients. Can you call them throughout the day to make sure that they're okay? Okay. Active shooter. So I'm all the way at the bottom of page 12, and actually I'm flipping to page 13. Who knows the difference? Well, first of all, has anyone ever seen an active shooter on TV? I mean, we've never seen these events occurring, right? It seems like every day we wake up, we turn on the news, and there's been some kind of shooting somewhere. So an active shooter is basically someone who doesn't have a target in mind. Their goal is to kill as many people as possible before they're taken down. That's their goal, the only one. And workplace violence incident, there is a target in mind, okay? So say that me and my husband aren't getting along, which we never do. We're always perfect little angels. We never... Mary just looked at me like... So my husband walks into the main office, and Regina, our receptionist's like, "Hey Joe, how are you doing today?" She's in her office, and he's like, "Okay, thank you, have a good day." And he walks back there and he shoots me. That's workplace violence, okay? He's not there to hurt anybody else, except the one he came for. Now, if Regina knew that my husband and I were having issues, and she said, "You can't see her today," he would kill her, and then he would walk back and finish what he came to do. Okay? So that's the difference between the two. And if you think, that would never happen to me, think about all the people who probably left their home one day and thought, that would never happen to me. So what do? Kathy and I we were down at the convention center at the Hyatt. And anytime I'm anywhere, again, sit through this for 10 months and your mind is completely focused on death and destruction, how do I get out of here? And we're sitting in this classroom and there's 2 doors here and 2 doors here. And I look at Kathy and I say, if he comes in that way, we're going out this door. I said, if he comes in this way, we're going to be a hero today because we're going to take him down. And she's like, all right, let's do it. But you should always have a plan. What would I do? We're instructing people to run. If you can, run. Don't run into another room. Get out of the building. Okay? Hiding should be your last resort. But if you have to, you want to get in the room, lock the door, push something in front of it, turn off the lights, and be quiet. So if you think about the main goal for an active shooter is what? To kill as many people as quickly as possible. If he does this, I'm moving on. If I can't get in, I'm moving on. You can always fight. So if you're cornered, you can fight. It's hard for someone to shoot accurately at you if you're throwing stuff at them, right? That's what Kathy and I were saying. Someone comes in the store, I'm throwing my chair at you and we're going to charge you because all these other people are going to be able to get out that door while I'm distracting you with flying debris. You should never try to negotiate. There has never been a case where an active shooter has ever been dissuaded by your sweet talk. Now, Netta might prove them wrong because she's very joyful. She might be the first to do it. Once they've decided to do it, you're not going to sway them. Okay, so don't try. Your goal is to get out and get safe. Okay? Now, they've scared you all to death. We'll move on to cybersecurity, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. But our risk as an agency is loss of patient data. Okay, so HIPAA violations. I don't know if any of you have heard of ransomware.
Yeah.
It's kind of been in the news recently. So a hospital goes in for the day to start. That's not how a hospital runs, but we're going to say in this scenario that it does. They go to log into their computer and they get a message on their screen. And it says, "We have your data, and it's all encrypted, and if you want it back, you can give us $2 million. And if you don't pay us $2 million by X time, we're going to sell it to the highest bidder on the black market." Do you think that cripples an agency? Because frankly, I don't have $2 million to pay to get it back, okay? Now what's happening, there's this new thing called WannaCry. And what they're doing is, once the hospital has been targeted and they've paid and they got their money back, WannaCry comes in right behind them and does the same thing. So it's very crippling when you can't access the data that you need. And it's really scary to think that, I mean, I've had my data stolen so many times. Anthem, the Ohio Department of Taxation lost my tax returns. I'm surprised that the other Christina Kennedy that's wandering the world with my social security number isn't standing here today giving this speech. But it is pretty scary to think about how vulnerable we are from that standpoint. Some of the things you can do if you have home computers, make sure they have virus software. Make sure that if you have passwords, that they're strong passwords. It shouldn't be hello or 123. It should be something.
Password.
It should not ever be password. I don't know if any of you use like online banking. That should be a very strong password. And when I say strong, random. And maybe you have to write it down somewhere. Don't leave it like taped to your computer. We have that in our office. Actually, when they set up all of our computers, the password was pass123. So when I gave the training, I'm like, if your password is still pass123, you really just need to change that today. Okay, so moving on to acts of terror. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here. I think you all have lived long enough in this world to have seen 9/11 and also to have seen the Oklahoma City bombing. Enough said, right? So we all know what kind of a threat that is. And basically in our plan, this is such a large category of stuff. We did not write a plan for it. What we did was say, you know, we're basically going to do what emergency management tells us to do, right? Because there's no way, number one, I'm going to know, pick a disease, pick a gas, pick any kind of anything. You know, that's so broad. So we're going to be following what they're telling us to do. That could be evacuate. That could be shelter in place. We're going to do what they say to do at that time. At the bottom of page 15, the same thing with chemical and hazard material release. Actually, in London, we have kind of a double whammy. We are right by the train tracks, and we have a chemical plant like right there. So if the train hits the chemical plant, we're in big trouble. So let's move on to fire emergency. Fires that we have a prevention plan, which is part of this plan. During a fire, if you're in one of our buildings, your number one goal is to get out and get safe. So you're going to leave through the exit that's farthest away from the danger and closest to you. If you've ever been in any of our buildings, there's a door in the front and the back, so actually that makes it pretty nice. If you're in the annex, the back door sticks, so you might just want to jump out the window. Okay? And there's lots of windows there, so. So if you are in the main building, we're going to gather down at the annex driveway. And when I get to the training, this will make more sense, but we had an emergency plan written prior to this to comply with OSHA. And we said if there's a fire in the main building, we're going to evacuate to that parking lot, which makes sense, right? It's right there. Well, we went to do our fire drill. And guess what was happening in the parking lot next door? The Strawberry Festival. Oh. We have nowhere to evacuate to. So that's where we're testing the plan and saying, that didn't work. So we revised it to say, okay, that's a safer location than... Actually, probably the Strawberry Festival would be what would cause our building fire. So if you're in the annex, you're going to go directly across the street. And in Marysville, they have that huge lawn. So pick a spot, put up your lawn chair, and I guess we'll watch it burn. If you are in a patient's home and you're visiting with a patient and their house catches fire or there's a fire, you should probably try to help that person get out of the house. Now, is that possible for all of our patients? No. Some of our patients are very sick. Well, most of them are very sick. They can't get out of bed, so they're bedbound. So what do you do with them now? They tell us to lower their bed, if they have like a hospital bed, to as close to the ground as you can. Why is that? Because smoke rises. Okay? If you can get them to the floor and make them comfortable, do so. That's going to buy them time. So you're trying to buy time for firemen to get there.
You could put them on a blanket on the floor and then pull the blanket out the door.
If you're physically able to do that, you could. Sure. Or if there were more people in the home that could help you do that, sure. If you cannot, you want to shut their door, like roll a towel or a shirt or something and put it under like the crack. And then you're getting out of the house, okay, and you're calling 911. We would prefer that you stay there until someone actually shows up, okay? Our main goal, number one, is you to get out safe. Number two is our patient safe, okay? Okay, and you should probably call Annetta or someone in the office and say, hey, I'm at so-and-so's house and it's burning to the ground, okay? I don't know when I started, so I'm just going to keep looking. Sheltering in place. Does anybody know what that means?
Prepare to stay where you are.
Prepare to stay where you are, but it could mean a little bit more than that. At the office, we have pre-made kits. Well, we will have. It's not quite done yet. Basically, what they want you to do is pick an area in your house that's the safest. So the least amount of doors, the least amount of window. They want you to tape plastic over the windows. Okay, so why would you even have to shelter in place? Because there's something outside that you can't breathe. Okay? So you're shutting off your HVAC. You don't want any air circulating from the outside. You're taping off the windows and the doors. And you're staying put. Can you do that at your home right now for 72 hours? Okay?
Yes.
So what's the likelihood that you'll ever have to do this? But what about if you do?
Yeah.
You know, I've lived on this earth for 39 years and I've never had to shelter in place. Does that mean I will never have to shelter in place? Think about where the world's headed to. Who's going to drop a bomb on us first? A dirty bomb that's going to contaminate the air. And you have to stay where you are until it's safe. I mean, folks, that's just the reality of where we're at today. So I would encourage everyone to at least think about where would we shelter in place at. At the office, we have designated areas. We have kits, pre-measured, pre-cut sheets of plastic to cover the area that they're going to stay in. Bottled water, extra blankets, extra toiletries, power bars. So we're trying to make it so our staff can stay there for 72 hours. What happens after 72 hours, I don't know. It might turn into...
Who recommended 72 hours?
That's the... FEMA says that you should plan to be on your own for 72 hours after an emergency or disaster. So they say, so my thing is if I have to be on my own for maybe 72 hours, then that's where I'm going to try to plan.
There's people that refuse to leave their homes.
Sure.
They would be on their own until...
Right, and if you remember when Hurricane Irma was bearing down, they're saying, we're telling you to evacuate. If you stay, you're on your own. Okay, so that's kind of the same facility evacuation. So again, I've kind of already covered this. You're exiting the exit that's closest to you, furthest away from the emergency. Communication plan. Basically, this is how we're going to communicate with our staff during emergency. So you can see the whole list of things. Pretty much, I think, Barb brought this up during our training, so we're going to have to think through it. How do we get a hold of you guys? And let you know what's going on. And it's probably going to be, we're going to call Annetta and she's going to let everyone else know through, I think you guys have a system called Call 'em All.
Yeah.
So that's probably how we're going to set that up. So Barb brought up a good point, how do we notify our volunteers? I'm like, I don't know. So that's probably what we're going to do. We have several different methods for receiving information, so you can read through those. Pretty much anything that happens on the internet or Facebook is true, so we're going to go ahead and use that as our means of information. Actually, that couldn't be farther from the truth. So. Patient communication. This was a very interesting part of the rule that made me cringe, because I was like, how are we going to do this? However, a recent thing happened in the office that made me appreciate this rule. Basically what it says is during emergency, we have to call all of our patients. All. Not just the folks that are involved. All. So if we had an incident that happened in southern Madison County, so I'm talking Mount Sterling, we still have to call all of our patients in Ridgewood to make sure that they're okay. Now, our protocol for follow-up is a little different. So anyone involved in the emergency, we're going to continue to call them every 12 hours to reassess. Are you still okay? The people in Ridgewood, we're going to call them the next day. We're not going to keep calling them at 3 in the morning or whatever. We received a hospice patient from Florida. Her family evacuated her. There wasn't an emergency yet. It was just the threat of said emergency. This patient arrives in Ohio, however many miles away from Florida, right? And we're trying to admit her into our hospice. So we're trying to get a hold of said hospice in Florida, and we can't get a hold of them. My thought is, why aren't they looking for her? Right? So we have a patient up here. They don't know where she's at. Did she tell them? I don't know. Nobody knows where she's at, except us. The reason why I think this is a good rule, because what if one of our patients in Richwood was visiting? I need to know where they're at. I need to know where they're all at. I need to make sure that everyone is safe. If you're a patient in living care, do you want someone looking for you if you're in trouble? If an emergency sweeps through, do you want us looking for you? And if we can't find you, do you want us to call emergency management and say, I can't find Betty? And they're going to go look for her. So that's why I think it's a good rule. At first I thought the same thing that Mary just said. But as you look at all the disasters that are happening, it makes sense to find people. We also have to locate all of our staff, whether they're on duty or not. I have to find them if they're on vacation. Are you okay? What's your status? Okay?
You're in trouble, Amanda.
Okay, so I'm going to jump down to the bottom of page 22. And this is volunteer uses. So how are we going to use volunteers during an emergency? In theory, we're not going to use anyone who's not already an established volunteer. Okay, so you all are established volunteers. What we're not going to do is have Sally RN come in off the street and say, we want to help and see your patients. No, but thank you, but no. Again, if any of you are like, I'm really interested in this, I would love to be able to help, let me know, because you're going to need a little bit more training than what you're getting today. But I would love for all of you to say, yes, I would love to be able to help, especially our RNs that are retired. That helps boost, Miriam. That helps boost our capacity, right? So if you're interested, let me know. Moving on to page 20. With the assumption that all of our patients are cared for, there are some things that we're willing to help our community with during an emergency. Like I said, we have medical staff, so they could help. There's a thing called hospital surge. Does anybody know what that means? Hospital surge.
Everybody's going to the hospital, too many people, too many patients.
Right. So if you think about Boston, if there had only been one level 1 trauma center, what would have happened? They would have been overwhelmed real quick. So I'm in the hospital, I get this call. It's Friday night in October. The bleachers just collapsed at London High School. Okay? What am I going to start doing? Well, anyone who's in here with a cough is now being discharged. Any bed that I can free, I'm discharging out to the community. As a hospital administrator, I'm calling Loving Care. I have 3 patients I need to discharge home. Can you take them? Why, yes, we can. So that's how we help respond to that surge. Or as the hospital is discharging less critical patients back out to the community, we're picking them up for home health or palliative care, whatever we need to do to help until that situation is passed. We need to keep our patients out of the hospital, right? So all the patients we currently have on staff or on census, they need to stay where they're at. That we can't afford them to need to go to the hospital, okay? Moving on to safety and security. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these slides, but suffice it to say that if there's an impending disaster or doom, we probably won't be sending you to a patient's home, period, okay? However, if you happen to be out and about, just personally, always be aware of your surroundings. If there are thunderstorms or tornado watches, be alert. Watch where you're going. If you are asked to go see a patient and there's impending danger, maybe you should say, could this wait till tomorrow? Do I have to go today? So just in general, just being aware of your surroundings and where you're going. If you're in another facility, I don't know how often you guys go into like skilled nursing facilities or assisted livings. Do you guys do that? Yeah?
Flowers and
What's
visit
that?
patients. Take flowers in and
Sure.
visit patients.
Right. So while you're in there, the same thing. Hey, nurses station, I'm here. I'm delivering flowers today. Why do you do that? Because if the building catches fire, you want them to know that I'm here and that someone should probably try to find me. Okay? As you're leaving, you guys have a good day. I'm out. Also, they always have the little emergency placards hanging on the wall everywhere. Take a look at it. Where are my exits? Where are the tornado shelters here? Make yourself familiar. Okay? The whole mantra through this is be alert. Know where you're at. Know what you're doing. On page 25, patient care. As you all know, we serve a very high-risk population. They have severe needs, they have disabilities, that any lack of service could lead them to the hospital, right? That's what we're trying to prevent. So you've all seen the emergency planning guide. Now the rule is also very specific in this, and I'm glad I read it and not our nursing staff, because they'd have been like, we quit, we're not doing this. But the rule actually says that every patient must have an individualized emergency preparedness plan documented in their chart. Now I'm looking at my two retired nurses and I see them go, oh, are you kidding me?
It adds to the admission time.
It adds to the admission time. Well, you're going to love me because what I've done. They also said that there has to be a documented emergency planning discussion that took place. So they want all this documented in the chart. So what did Christina do? Because she's so lovely and loves her nurses, I made a form, and it's a checklist. Okay? So all they have to do is, so we're looking at needs like, what if this patient had to be evacuated? What kind of needs do they have? If they have to be transported, can they be transported sitting up? Do they have to be laying down? Do they need someone riding with them that has medical knowledge? So this is the form that the nurses are filling out. I made the emergency planning brochure that's in your, that's the emergency planning discussion. On the form it says, I reviewed this with the patient and their caregiver. We're going to take that form, we're going to scan it to the patient's chart. Now everyone has an individualized emergency plan in their chart. Everybody's also going to be selecting patient priority codes. And basically what this tells us very quickly is who are my most critical patients, who needs to be seen today, who could be seen tomorrow, who could be seen 3 days from now. Why is this important? If we have a level 3 snow emergency, and I need to know which of my patients have to be seen today, I can print that list, I can look at all my level 1 people, we can make phone calls to them, we can decide, do they really need a visit today? Okay, so it very quickly helps me to assess the patient census that we have. And I have all the priority codes listed there for you to review. Training and testing. Basically, the training that we're doing is pretty much going to be one of your mandatory in-services annually. I know you all are thrilled. I'm thrilled as well because I have to come up with them and train them. But pretty much we're going to do a training every year that pretty much covers the same stuff that we're doing today. The testing of the plan, we're required by the government to do 2 exercises a year. The first exercise is called a tabletop exercise. I don't know if anybody knows what a tabletop exercise is, but basically they say, here's your scenario, let's talk it through. Would our plan work if that scenario took place? The second is called a full-scale exercise. And what that means is we need to do an exercise with our community partners that tests our plan and pieces of theirs all at once. Okay? That part of the rule actually made me cringe as well, but we're working through that. We're going to be doing quality. So I don't know if any of you have worked in the office and heard the term QAPI, quality assurance, performance improvement. We're doing that same type of thing with the emergency plan. It's called an after action report improvement plan. Basically, when we do any kind of drill or exercise, we're going to look, what did we want to accomplish? Did we accomplish it? What worked well? What didn't work well? How can we improve, and who is going to actually do those improvements? So that's all in one document. Okay, almost done, I promise. Medical records. This isn't as critical for you guys because I think you already fill out paper documentation, right? But our nurses do not. It's all electronic for them. So we had to come up with a plan that said, okay, if we don't have electronic documentation, what are we going to do? So every discipline has a paper note that they can fill out. When they fill that paper note out, they're going to send it to me. Because why? We still need a bill for that visit. And then they're going to give it to our office staff so that when everything is resolved, it can be put into the paper chart. For HIPAA, during an emergency situation, we are not released from HIPAA. So we can't be like, wow, a tornado just decimated in Madison County, we don't have to worry about, here's all our patient information. Actually, if we have paper records, they could literally be all over Madison County if a tornado hit. What we can do is, we are allowed to release information that would help another patient. Okay, so if you think back to like the epidemic or pandemic, we can release patient symptoms in order to help another person. Okay, does that make sense? We're also allowed to release information such as Sally is on oxygen. She needs to be evacuated because she doesn't have electricity. I can release that information. I don't have to say why Sally needs oxygen. Okay? So I'm releasing the least amount of information as needed to help the patient. Okay? Does that make sense? Okay, so at the end of the day, we have to recover from this, right? We either recover or we don't. Right? So, what are we doing in advance? Well, anything that's damaged is going to be fixed, obviously. If you look at that structure in the picture, I'm not quite sure if we recover from that real quick, because that building's like falling in. As far as like data, I'm in charge of making sure that we have quality backups, and so we can do data recovery, okay? So if a tornado wipes us off, we have a backup in Marysville, and vice versa. So, the very last thing I wanted to talk about with you is something that I feel very strongly about, is if an emergency or disaster occurs, we're all going to be living in a new normal, right? So the life that we know today might not be the same after. Why? We could have lost family members. Our job may no longer be viable. We could lose pets. I don't know about y'all, but my dog is like the most important thing ever. If I had my computer, I would show you pictures of her because she's adorable. So my thing is, Loving Care needs to be able to help our employees adjust to that new normal. And how do we do that? You know, we have social workers on staff. We have 2 clergy on staff to help our employees adjust, okay? We don't know what they're going to have seen. I don't know if any of you have seen this picture from the Oklahoma City bombing. And it's of this fireman holding this baby. I don't know if the baby's dead or alive, you can't tell. But 5 or 6 months after that picture was taken, he committed suicide. He could not deal with the things that he saw that day. So as an agency, we've said, that's not going to be our staff. Okay, we're going to make sure that our staff are able to somehow manage and cope and deal with the things that they may see as a result. We're going to do salary continuation, flexible hours, daycare. Maybe the school is destroyed. People still need to come to work. Don't know what I'm going to do with Tommy today. I'm going to bring him to work. My dog, I may not have a place for her to go. I'm going to bring her to work with me. I would love to do that anyway, by the way. She barks a lot though, so that's why I can't. Temporary shelter and transportation. We have washing machines in all of our buildings. Come do a load of laundry. So as an agency, we're really dedicated to making sure that whatever happens, our employees are going to be able to manage through and adjust to their new life.